says that with an increase of media control by American billionaires, the public broadcaster should act as a safeguard for our country's cultural sovereignty. I want to bring in the CBC's Janice McGregor. She's in our nation's capital. So what do we know about this plan?
No, I'm a new mom. This is a wonderful time in my life. And after much consideration, I've come to the conclusion that I need to make the right decision for my family and make sure that I'm fully present for the first few years of my child's life. And this is why I won't be running again in the next election. Lorsque je me suis présentée en 2000, it's difficult to talk about pressing issues without being the target of hateful, discriminatory, or simply misleading comments. We hear a lot about freedom of expression. We need to make sure it exists and that it's protected. It's the foundation of a healthy, dignified, and proud society. Yet, this same freedom of expression is currently being exploited and undermined. At the moment, the richest people on the planet control much of our means of communication and our space for dialogue. And what we're seeing is that these people want to influence our stories, the political conditions of every country, and the collective choices we make with an efficiency unrivaled in human history. The worst thing about all this, we have no control over the direction that these platforms will take or how they will increasingly shape our relationship with the world.
Well, it was so interesting to hear Pascale Saint-Onge, who is not going to run again, but sort of as her last big job here before we do head into potentially a spring election, unveiling this plan and framing it as consistent with something that was important a century ago when the CBC was first set up to offer a national Canadian voice in a world where otherwise, as people rode the railway, they had only American content to listen to. Again, Canadian sovereignty at the forefront of political conversations here in Canada. And Canada's public broadcaster, in the words of the minister, essential to having a way for Canadians to control what people can know about their own country, to not be sort of the victim of disinformation or sort of have facts defined by the algorithms of platforms controlled elsewhere. The importance of having a national broadcaster at work for Canadians as a public service, particularly in the context of, for example, national emergencies. She talked about the forest fires in Jasper last summer, for example, as a case where Canadians needed to be able to get information from a trusted source. She also talked about foreign interference and the importance of having a sovereign public broadcaster that isn't susceptible to meddling from hostile foreign states in terms of the information it carries and being accountable for that. But of course, all of this costs money. And so how to pay for it? A proposal that would dramatically alter the way the CBC Radio-Canada is funded, having a per capita statutory appropriation for the CBC. Now, she suggested an amount that would be similar to what she called a national average for public broadcasters around the world, $62 per person. She says right now, what CBC receives, and public funding is some 78% of the budget for CBC Radio-Canada, is more akin to $33 per person per year. She says that's more like how the U.S. Funds public broadcasting, and she says that needs to change. Canadians need to be accessing particularly news and information programming for free without commercials. And if the CBC focused on that and was funded better, that could free it from needing to use advertising, which would free up advertising dollars potentially for the private sector. But she also very much framed this proposal as far as future funding for the CBC in some stark political terms. Here's the minister.
It's important that we stop talking about defunding or funding CBC and we talk about a vision and a plan for the future of the CBC. What it could mean for Canadians, especially at a time where we know that our means of communications are controlled in most parts by tech billionaire oligarchs in the United States. It is more relevant than ever in the current context to have and to be able to rely on a public service media. And to not understand that reality shows the lack of understanding of the global context that we're in, and it shows the lack of love for our own country and for the fact that we need to be able to tell our own stories in our own way. And Radio-Canada, CBC will never be controlled by Musk, Zuckerberg, or any other private billionaire tech oligarch.
The minister talked about the leadership role that she believes CBC Radio-Canada could play when it comes to innovating in the broadcast sector, the importance of having the public broadcaster lead the way when it comes to ethics in adopting new technologies. She's also proposing some governance changes, that the head of the CBC wouldn't be appointed by the minister in the future, but would be appointed by an enlarged board, one that ideally would have representation from all the provinces and territories. She also wanted to make it clear that in her vision, the CBC doesn't belong to the Liberals, it doesn't belong to the Conservatives, it doesn't belong to any political party. It should belong to the people. And future changes to the Broadcasting Act, which she hopes a subsequent government will make, should make it more clear that this is a public good and not something that should be subject to budget debates or political decision-making year to year, government to government.
And meanwhile, Janice, we know that while this announcement was underway, that the Conservative Party leader was also making an announcement.
Almost nobody watches CBC television. They have among the worst ratings of any network, and yet Trudeau gives them billions more. We're going to cut wasteful spending, not just there, but across the government to bring down inflation, deficits, and taxes.